Okay, now we've started to look at cells under the microscope, but what do we actually see and what parts are important? So what I've done is I've broken this into two short videos or shorter videos that are going to look at the various parts of cells, and we're going to try to work out what they do and why they're important. Now we know that if we were a cell, we have parts of us that do certain jobs. Well, cells are the same, especially the newer cells, the eukaryotic cells, or the ones that are inside of us. They tend to do certain jobs so the whole cell can exist and the cell can actually live and survive by itself. Now, when we have a multicellular organism like us, that maybe doesn't apply as much. But if there are certain little animals, and hopefully we're going to have a chance to see some of those in some pond water, that are only made of one cell. And this means that they need all the parts to do everything. All right? So here I talk about the body parts, and especially remember there are things that are responsible for growing the cell, for repairing the cell, for making new cell bits, and for respiration, in other words, the energy. But there are lots of other jobs that things must be done as well. So if we look at this one, what we've got in eukaryotic cells, we do have it in prokaryotic as well, but it's just not as well organised. Now what we have is a central part that has got a membrane around it, and it contains all of the DNA of the cell. Now that decides what the cell is going to do overall and what its job and its function is. So if we're talking about a skin cell, then the DNA makes sure that if it's going to reproduce or repair itself, it repairs itself as a skin cell. It doesn't do other things, all right? Now, this stuff's in the centre, and it has to send messages out through its membrane so that its will or its instructions can be followed. Sometimes we actually call this the brain of the cell, but how about we just call it the control centre? Now I'm going to ask you to think about analogies we can use, let's say with humans or with other non-living things. Right, one of the most important ones. Now I've been saying to you all the time that energy is needed for living things, and one of the key things that energy things must be able to do is respire. Now, in the cytoplasm, we actually find these little wrinkly bits, and if we cut them open, they look like a bean, and they've got little wrinkly bits on the inside, and that is more membranes. So it's a membrane around the outside and membranes inside, and that gives more surface area for things to happen on. So it gives more space for things to happen, if you like. And here is where the cell produces energy. Oxygen comes in dissolved in the water and comes into here. The food molecules come into here as well, the sugars and goodness knows what. And chemical called ATP comes out. Now I'm not going to ask you to memorise that, but later on we'll find out more about ATP. A stands for adenosine, T for tri, and P for phosphate, and it's a chemical. And the chemical energy it contains is used by the cell to keep doing what it needs to do. If we have the outside of the cell, and it's a really, really strange thing, and it's got little parts here. Now, this is made from lipids and protein. And what it does is it is like the border control. It lets things move in and let things move out. Now it's a very complex process, but as we're going to find out, there is a simple process that lets water and small things come in and out, and we're going to see about osmosis and diffusion at some stage later. But this is our cell membrane. Now, when you think about it, a cell would be crazy to let stuff in the cytoplasm, like mitochondria and various other organelles, or little parts, go through its cell wall. It would be killing itself, or cell membrane. So it doesn't really do that. So the cell membrane also stops those things from leaking out, if you like. Very important part of our cell. Right, now we've got the energy from our mitochondria. Cells and most living things are made from things called proteins. Right? And these are like the builders of the cell. So if a cell is damaged or needs to grow or whatever, it needs to make more of this stuff. So what happens is the nucleus sends a message out to the ribosome saying, I need some more materials made for the cell to grow. So the ribosome makes them. So it's sort of like the cell builder. A very, very important part of the cell. It, of course, is in the cytoplasm as well. And the last one is the cytoplasm itself. Now, this is easy for us to recognise. When we have a cell, we have the area around the outside, the membrane. Right? We've got the nucleus in the middle, which is doing DNA and stuff. Now, all this blue stuff, which has got the bits floating around in it, it's like a sea. And it's got the bits floating around in it, is your cytoplasm. And that's where basically all the parts that are about the cell living and growing and whatever, they occur here in the cytoplasm. All right, so that's why it's important. So it's an area outside the nucleus, but inside the cell membrane, where basically all the cell stuff happens, all the big stuff happens. Right, we'll come back and have a look at some of the more exotic ones after this one.